Hello and welcome back to our little anime lit club. Today we are going to discuss the first 5 chapters of Duchess in the Attic. This one was written by Mori, and I believe it was originally a light novel series slash web novel, but I am reading and reviewing the manga adaptation. So today we'll go over the plot of chapters 1 through 5, and then I'll share some of my thoughts and impressions on the series so far. I haven't read past chapter 5, so there's not going to be any spoilers. So any predictions I give are unconfirmed speculation. But yeah, if that sounds interesting to you and you'd want to be notified of future episodes, please consider subscribing to the channel. I read and review a ton of different manga and anime, so there's a lot to check out and there's always more content coming out. But with that being said, let's jump right into our plot summary. So, this story follows Opal, who is the daughter of an earl in a sort of fictitious kingdom. She always dreamed of having a wonderful wedding, but right after she entered high society, she was caught up in a cruel scandal. Basically, someone attacked her in one of the gardens, but gossip changed the story into her having some sort of lover's rendezvous, and this scandal gave birth to further gossip, and soon her reputation was ruined. So, because of this, she returned home, but everyone there treated her well since they knew her and therefore knew that the scandal had to be total nonsense. Here, Opal reveals herself to be a really strong character since she remains optimistic despite her situation. She decides to give her all to the management of her land and plans for a future since she's going to inherit some land from her grandmother. Right as she is recovering emotionally from all of this, however, she is suddenly locked into a marriage of convenience and is married off within 3 days. Opal is married to Duke Hubert, who is suffering economically. Duke Hubert ends up being immensely cruel and cold to Opal, and their wedding doesn't have any sort of ceremony, despite her always wanting a magical wedding. He tells her, as they head to his estate in the capital of the kingdom, that she's forbidden from interacting with the angel there named Stella. And he makes Opal live in the guest room and basically just locks her away. In response to this, Opal decides to move into the attic as a sort of display of resilience and resistance. While there, she reads through ledgers of Hubert's lands and realizes that there is a ton of fraud in them. She ends up asking Hubert if she can return home to see her family, but really she wants to sort of run these ledgers by the manager of land for the earldom. Hubert agrees, and he's just sort of like, you can do whatever you want. Because again, he's very cruel and cold and aloof to her. And as she leaves this interaction, she actually bumps into Stella, who lashes out at her and claims that Opal stole Hubert from her. And as a result, I personally get very suspicious vibes from Stella. So Opal then leaves and returns to her home in the earldom, and there she shows the ledger to Trevor, who's the manager of the Earl's land, and he vouches that there's definitely fraud in these ledgers. And as a result, he ultimately accuses Omar, who is the duchy's land manager. During this conversation, we also learn that Duke Hubert's parents died when he was still really young, and that he was raised by the Nothams, and Stella, therefore, was sort of like a sister to him. We also learn that he hasn't returned home to his duchy mansion in 14 years and instead just lives in the imperial capital. Since they don't have any evidence to prove that Omar is the one committing the fraud, Opal decides to travel to the duchy and look for evidence. She sends a letter warning them of her arrival and travels with her personal maid, Nadja, and Trevor, who pretends to be her personal servant. Plus, since she's the Duchess, she's allowed to go here just to check out the estate, but really she's there to look for evidence. When they arrive at the duchy, however, they find that it's a very pleasant location, so it's all the stranger that Hubert has never come here. Furthermore, Opal is surprised to find that the staff are very kind and welcoming, which is very different from the servants at Duke Hubert's capital estate. Omar, however, admittedly does seem a bit suspicious. As Opal explores the Duchy's mansion, she realizes that the books in the library alone could have paid off Hubert's debt, meaning he didn't actually have to marry her to pay off his debt, so it seems like he's genuinely unaware of just how nice the Duchy mansion is and the value of its items like the books. During all of this, Opal is pretending to be sort of frivolous and like she only cares about shopping and stuff. So it's kind of a bummer seeing this interaction since I can't help but feel like she's making a bad first impression on the really nice staff members who seem to be genuinely good. So Opal invites Omar to join her on a shopping trip in order to try to, trick him and figure out some information about him, but he turns her down, but as a result, she still has to go alone. And while she's off on the shopping trip, a strange man named LeBeau asks to meet her. He reveals himself to be a money lender and tells Opal that Omar has a serious gambling addiction and owes a ton of money to him. Opal ends up negotiating with LeBeau to get his ledger and any other relevant paperwork showing Omar's guilt in return for paying off Omar's debt. And that sort of concludes chapters 1 through 5. So now I just kind of want to jump into my thoughts and impressions. So, the plot so far, as you can probably tell from the summary, is kind of crazy. I do like it though. It's weird because personally, I usually hate stories where a likable person is trapped in a horrible situation with horrible people, since I kind of find it to just be very funky, but this one didn't bother me as much. I was relieved when Opal left the Duke's capital residence, though, since that environment was quickly becoming too stifling. There is a nice humor to some of the scenes with Duke Hubert and Opal that's fun, and I hope we do eventually get to see them warm up to each other. When it's fun, it feels like they're just having two separate conversations, and as a result, Hubert is just completely baffled by Opal. And I really like how she feels like a strong character who doesn't just immediately crumble and back down. That being said, Hubert really needs to learn how to just like chill and communicate because I feel like it's already getting a little annoying how he's just incapable of communicating with Opal. So, what else? What else? I do feel like Stella kind of has to be evil. She just has that evil look on her face, and I was kind of surprised by the reveal at the end of chapter 5 since Elmar does seem to have skeletons in his closet. I thought he was a little too easy of an antagonist for this whole fraud plot line, and I thought he was just going to be like a big red herring, but I guess we'll just have to read on to see if things are more complicated than they appear. Also, Opal's dad is really weird because he clearly raised Opal and she's a good person and seems to have a good sense of personality and character, but he was like insanely cruel when he married her off. And people seem to look up to him, and it's said that he rules his earldom well and that the people under him are happy, but he was just like so mean to Opal that I feel like I can't trust him. There does seem to be more going on with him. I kind of wonder if he has some sort of master plan and this marriage is just a single chess move in a much larger scheme, but using his own daughter as a sort of sacrifice for that sort of, chess move play just makes me still think that he's ultimately kind of a villain. I really like Nadja and Trevor, and I hope that they get together later in the story. I don't know what the age gap is or if they already have romantic interests already, but I feel like there was sort of a frame or a panel where Nadja is spying on Trevor and seems to be looking at him with awe. So I think there might be something there. But in general, I'm just so glad that Opal doesn't have to do all of this alone and that she has people on her team on her side while she kind of goes on this big adventure. And I mentioned this earlier, but I do hope that Opal doesn't burn too many bridges with the Duchy staff. I'm worried that she's going to ruin their impression of her since she's play acting in order to spy on Omar. And, they seem like a really cute group as they were all excited to cook her a meal and they were super welcoming when she arrived. So I hope we get to see more of them, and I hope they sort of become like a support system for her as she deals with everything going on with Duke Hubert. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I really have to say today on chapters 1 through 5. Please let me know if you'd like to see more of this series since it kind of helps me plan out future videos. But yeah, this one was fun. I didn't have a lot of expectations going into it. I just thought it sounded interesting because of its title, but I was pleasantly surprised by the story so far. So yeah. Also, if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing and giving the video a like. It helps a ton. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap things up. So take care, and I will see you in the next one.